Hi, I'm Anna Evans and I'm 28 years old. I'm the granddaughter they tried to destroy. While my grandmother lay dying in the oncology ward, fighting the cancer that was eating her alive, my own family orchestrated the most devastating betrayal I could have ever imagined. 1.2 million. Gone. Every penny I'd saved for her experimental treatment that could have saved her life. My brother Marcus laughed as he signed the papers. She's going to die anyway, he said with a cold smile. My mother nodded approvingly. Anna's always been too emotional about these things. I stood there, my world crashing down around me, knowing they had no idea what storm they had just unleashed. If you've ever been betrayed by family while fighting to save someone's life, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready to hear how I exposed their $1 million fraud. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in November. I was in my small apartment in downtown Seattle, reviewing patient files from the pediatric clinic where I worked as a nurse practitioner. The rain was drumming against my windows with that persistent Pacific Northwest rhythm that usually helped me focus. But when I saw Dr. Richardson's name on my phone screen, my stomach dropped. Anna, her voice was gentle but urgent. It's about your grandmother, Eleanor. The latest scans show the cancer has spread faster than we anticipated. We need to move quickly if we're going to try the experimental immunotherapy protocol we discussed. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Grandma Eleanor had raised me after my parents' messy divorce when I was 12. She was the only person in my family who had ever truly believed in me, who had supported my dream of becoming a nurse, who had held me when I cried after particularly difficult shifts at the hospital. How much time do we have? I asked, already reaching for my laptop. Days, maybe a week at most. The treatment center in Switzerland has an opening, but they need confirmation and payment within 48 hours. After hanging up, I immediately logged into my savings account, the one I'd been building for exactly this purpose for the past 6 years. Working double shifts, taking on weekend consultations, living in a tiny apartment when I could afford better. Every sacrifice had been worth it for this moment.
124.700,000
The number glowed on my screen like a beacon of hope. I'd started this fund the day Grandma Eleanor was first diagnosed. She'd tried to talk me out of it, saying she was too old, that I should save for my own future. But I couldn't just stand by and watch the woman who'd given me everything slip away when there were options, when there was hope. I barely slept that night. By 6 a.m., I was already dressed and heading to the bank to initiate the wire transfer to Geneva. The Swiss clinic required payment up front. Their cutting-edge CAR-T cell therapy didn't come cheap, but the success rates were promising for cases like Eleanor's. I pulled into the bank parking lot just as they opened, my hands shaking slightly from too much coffee and adrenaline. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of rain. Everything felt sharper, more vivid, like the world was holding its breath. Inside, I approached the customer service desk where Janet, a banker I'd worked with for years, was just settling in for the day. Anna, early bird today, she said with a warm smile. What can I help you with? I need to wire transfer the funds from my savings account to a medical facility in Switzerland. It's urgent. Janet's fingers flew over her keyboard. Of course, let me pull up your account and… Her expression changed. The smile faded, replaced by confusion, then something that looked like pity. Anna, I'm sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your account. My heart started pounding. What kind of issue? She turned her monitor slightly so I could see. Where my $1.2 million should have been, there was a balance of $47.32. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring at the edges. That's impossible. I checked it last night. There was over $1 million in there. Janet's voice was gentle but professional. According to our records, there was a large withdrawal yesterday at 3:15 p.m. The transaction was authorized by joint account holders. Joint account holders. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd forgotten about that detail from when I first opened the account at 18. My mother, Patricia Evans, had insisted on being a co-signer because I was too young to handle that much responsibility alone. At the time, it had seemed reasonable. I was just starting college, working part-time, barely making ends meet. Who authorized the withdrawal? I whispered, though I already knew. Patricia Evans and Marcus Evans. Your mother and brother, according to our records. The bank suddenly felt too small, too hot. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Can you show me the paperwork? Janet hesitated, then pulled out a file. There it was, my signature on the withdrawal authorization. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, practiced, but the subtle differences were clear to me. The way the A in Anna curled slightly to the left instead of right. The way the E in Evans was too sharp at the bottom. They had forged my signature. I need to see the security footage from yesterday, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. I'm sorry, Anna, but I can't authorize that without. They forged my signature, I interrupted. This is fraud. I want to see who walked into this bank and stole my money. Janet's expression shifted from sympathy to concern. She glanced around, then leaned closer. Let me get my manager. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a small conference room watching grainy security footage on a laptop screen. My stomach churned as I watched my mother walk confidently up to the teller window, my brother beside her, both of them smiling like they were making a routine deposit. The teller, a young man I didn't recognize, barely glanced at the paperwork before processing the withdrawal. $1.2 million, transferred to an account I'd never seen before. Do you want to file a police report? The manager, Mr. Hendricks, asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. They had stolen my grandmother's last chance at life. But before the police arrived, I needed answers. I needed to understand how my own family could do this to me, to her. The drive to my mother's house in Bellevue took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I kept replaying the security footage in my mind, watching my mother's casual demeanor as she essentially signed my grandmother's death warrant. I pulled into the circular driveway of the house I'd grown up in, the house my grandmother had actually paid for, though my mother had somehow maneuvered herself onto the deed years ago. The perfectly manicured lawn and pristine exterior felt like a mockery now. I didn't knock. I used my key and walked straight into the living room where I found my mother, Patricia, sitting on her expensive Italian leather sofa, calmly sipping coffee and reading a magazine. She looked up as I entered, and I swear I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face before she composed herself. Anna, honey. What a nice surprise. You look terrible. Are you sleeping enough? Where's my money? She blinked innocently. What money? The $1.2 million you and Marcus stole from my account yesterday. Patricia set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Oh, that money. We didn't steal anything, Anna. We're co-signers on that account, remember? And frankly, we decided it was time to make some more practical decisions about family finances. Practical decisions? My voice rose an octave. That money was for Grandma Eleanor's treatment. She's dying. She's 78 years old, Anna, Patricia said, her tone becoming cold and clinical. The treatment might give her a few more months, maybe a year. That's a lot of money for such a small return on investment. I felt like I'd been slapped. Return on investment? We're talking about a human life, your mother's life. Marcus chose that moment to walk into the room, a protein shake in one hand and his phone in the other. At 26, he was 2 years younger than me, but had somehow convinced himself he was the smarter, more practical one. He looked at me with that smug expression I'd learned to hate during our teenage years. Oh good, she found out, he said, not even looking up from his phone. I was wondering when you'd notice. Marcus, how could you do this? She's our grandmother. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold and calculating. She's dying anyway, Anna. This way, the money goes to people who can actually benefit from it, people with a future. People like you mean? People like us, Patricia corrected. Marcus is starting his investment firm, and I've been looking at that property in Tuscany. This money will actually generate wealth instead of being thrown away on false hope. I stared at them both, these people who shared my DNA but felt like complete strangers. So you decided to forge my signature and commit fraud to fund your lifestyle while letting your mother die? We didn't forge anything, Marcus said with a lazy shrug. Mom practiced your signature for weeks. She's actually pretty good at it. The casual admission hit me like a physical blow. They had planned this. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was premeditated theft. You're both monsters, I whispered. Patricia's mask of maternal concern finally slipped entirely. Don't be so dramatic, Anna. You've always been too emotional, too attached. Eleanor has lived a long life. It's time to be realistic about these things. Realistic? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about realistic? Let me tell you what's realistic. I'm going to the police. I'm going to press charges for fraud, for forgery, for theft. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are. Marcus finally put down his phone, looking mildly annoyed. You're going to what now? You heard me. No, Anna, Patricia said, standing up and smoothing her designer blouse. You're not going to do any of those things. Because if you do, I'll make sure Eleanor loses her insurance coverage. I still have power of attorney for her medical decisions, remember? One phone call from me and they'll discharge her from the hospital tonight. The threat hung in the air like poison. I realized with growing horror that she was right. In the chaos of Eleanor's diagnosis, we'd never updated her power of attorney. Patricia still held all the legal cards. You wouldn't, I breathed. Try me, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I left their house with my hands shaking and my mind racing. They had me trapped. If I went to the police, they'd retaliate against Eleanor. If I didn't, she would die anyway when the treatment window closed. But they had underestimated me. I'd spent 6 years working in hospitals, navigating complex medical systems, solving problems under pressure. I'd dealt with insurance companies, pharmaceutical reps, and hospital administrators. I knew how to fight. I just needed to be smarter about it. My first call was to my grandmother's lawyer, Henry Morrison. He'd been handling Eleanor's affairs for 30 years and had always been fond of me. If anyone could help me find a legal loophole, it would be him. Anna! His warm voice was a relief after the coldness of my family. How are you holding up, dear? Not well, Henry. I need your help with something urgent. I explained the situation quickly, watching the late afternoon shadows lengthen across my apartment. When I finished, there was a long pause. Those bastards, he said finally, and I was surprised by the vehemence in his usually gentle voice. Eleanor suspected something like this might happen. That's why she came to see me 3 weeks ago. My heart skipped. What do you mean? She changed her power of attorney, Anna. She made you her primary decision-maker for all medical and financial matters. She said she didn't trust Patricia's judgment when it came to her care. I nearly dropped the phone. Are you serious? Dead serious. I have the paperwork right here. Your mother has no legal authority over Eleanor's medical decisions anymore. Eleanor specifically instructed me not to tell the family until it became necessary. It's necessary now. I'll be right over. An hour later, Henry was sitting at my kitchen table with a folder full of documents. The new power of attorney was ironclad, witnessed, and notarized. But more importantly, there was something else. Your grandmother also moved her assets into a trust fund 3 weeks ago, Henry explained. She suspected your mother might try something like this. The trust has $800,000 in it, specifically designated for Eleanor's medical care. Patricia and Marcus don't even know it exists. I stared at the papers, tears blurring my vision. Even in her weakened state, battling cancer and chemotherapy, my grandmother had been protecting me, protecting herself. There's more, Henry continued. Eleanor gave me very specific instructions about what to do if your family tried to interfere with her care. She wants you to have full access to this trust, and she wants you to handle all decisions about her treatment. It wasn't the full $1.2 million, but it might be enough. The Swiss clinic had mentioned they sometimes offered payment plans for exceptional cases. I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Richardson. Anna? How did the transfer go? There's been a complication, but I might have an alternative funding source. Can you contact the clinic in Geneva and see if they'd accept $800,000 with a payment plan for the remainder? I'll call them right now. While she made the call, I sat with Henry, planning our next moves. We needed to move quickly, both to get Eleanor into treatment and to deal with my family's theft. I want to press charges, I told him. Fraud, forgery, theft, whatever will stick. Henry nodded grimly. I've already contacted a criminal attorney I know. But Anna, you need to understand, this could get very ugly. Your family won't go quietly. I don't care. They stole money meant to save someone's life. They need to face consequences. My phone rang. Dr. Richardson. Anna, I have good news. The clinic will accept $800,000 upfront with a payment plan for the remaining $400,000. They can have Eleanor on a flight to Geneva tomorrow morning if you can get the funds transferred tonight. Relief flooded through me. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Tell them yes. After Henry left to begin the legal proceedings against my family, I drove to the hospital to see my grandmother. She was sleeping when I arrived, looking so fragile in her hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. But when I took her hand, her eyes fluttered open. Anna, she whispered, her voice hoarse from the medications. Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling? She squeezed my hand weakly. Like I'm dying, dear. But I'm assuming you're here because you found out about your mother's latest scheme. I blinked in surprise. You knew? Eleanor's lips curved into a small smile. I've known Patricia for 50 years, Anna. I knew exactly what she would try to do the moment she found out about your savings account. That's why I took precautions. Henry told me about the trust fund. Good. And I assume you've already arranged for the treatment in Switzerland? I nodded, tears spilling over. We can get you on a flight tomorrow morning. Excellent. She patted my hand with surprising strength. Now about your family. I want you to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law.
Gran mai. No arguments, Anna.
What they did was unforgivable. They stole from you, they lied to you, and they were willing to let me die to fund their greed. They need to face consequences, or they'll just do it again to someone else. That night I barely slept. I was coordinating with the Swiss clinic, arranging Eleanor's medical transport, and working with Henry's criminal attorney friend to build a case against my family. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Part of me expected Patricia or Marcus to call, to threaten me again or try to manipulate me into backing down. But the calls never came. Maybe they thought they'd won. Maybe they assumed I'd give up and let Eleanor die quietly while they enjoyed their stolen money. They were wrong. At 3 a.m. I was still awake, poring over financial documents that Henry had given me, trying to understand the full scope of what my family had done. The criminal attorney, David Walters, had sent over a preliminary analysis of the case, and it was even worse than I'd initially thought. According to his investigation, Patricia and Marcus had been systematically targeting elderly family members for years. My great-aunt Rose, who had died 2 years ago supposedly penniless, had actually had over $400,000 in her estate that mysteriously disappeared shortly before her death. My cousin James's college fund, which his deceased father had specifically set aside for his education, had been drained when James was only 16, too young to even know it existed. The pattern was always the same: gain access to accounts through forged documents or exploited joint ownership, transfer the money to shell companies they controlled, then act innocent when questioned. They had turned financial abuse into an art form. But what made my stomach turn most was discovering that they had done this to Eleanor before. 3 years ago, she had a savings account with nearly $200,000 that she had mentioned wanting to leave to me in her will. Patricia had convinced her to make it a joint account for convenience in case of emergency, then had slowly drained it over 18 months, taking money in small amounts so Eleanor wouldn't notice the gradual decline. When Eleanor had finally asked about the missing money, Patricia had convinced her that she was becoming forgetful due to her age and that the money had never existed in the amounts she remembered. Eleanor, already struggling with the early symptoms of her cancer and the mental fog that came with her initial treatments, had accepted Patricia's gaslighting and never questioned it again. Reading about their calculated manipulation of a sick elderly woman made me so angry I had to step outside onto my apartment balcony to keep from screaming. The Seattle skyline glittered below me, indifferent to the horror I was uncovering about my own family. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Stop digging or you'll regret it. I stared at the message, my hands trembling slightly. They knew what I was doing. Somehow they had found out about the legal proceedings, about the investigation. Maybe they had contacts at the bank, or maybe they were just smart enough to know that I wouldn't give up easily. A second message arrived. Your grandmother is very vulnerable right now. Hospital security isn't perfect. The threat was clear and it terrified me. But it also told me something important. They were scared. If they weren't worried about what I might find, they wouldn't be trying to intimidate me into stopping. I screenshot both messages and forwarded them to David Walters with a note, received these an hour ago. Does this help our case? His response came back within minutes. Absolutely. Threatening a witness is a federal crime. Forward these to Detective Chen immediately. Also, I'm contacting hospital security about your grandmother. I spent the rest of the night making phone calls, coordinating security measures for Eleanor, and working with law enforcement to trace the threatening messages. By dawn, I had learned that the texts had come from a burner phone purchased with cash, but security cameras at the store where it was bought had captured a clear image of Marcus making the purchase. Even in their desperation, they were sloppy criminals. As the sun rose over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I realized that I felt calmer than I had since this whole nightmare began. Yes, my family had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Yes, they were threatening me and my dying grandmother. But for the first time in my life I was seeing them clearly, not as the family I'd wished they could be, but as the predators they actually were. And predators, I had learned in my years as a nurse, could be stopped if you were smart enough and brave enough to fight back. The morning news was playing quietly on my laptop as I made coffee and prepared for the day ahead. A story caught my attention: local investment advisor under investigation for elder fraud. I turned up the volume and felt my blood run cold as I recognized the face on the screen. Marcus. According to the report, the State Securities Commission had been investigating Marcus's investment firm for 6 months after receiving complaints from elderly clients who claimed their accounts had been drained through unauthorized trades. The investigation had been quietly building a case, but now with the bank fraud charges, they were ready to move forward with a much larger prosecution. The news anchor mentioned that authorities believed Marcus's firm had defrauded victims of over $8 million across multiple states. I called David Walters immediately. Did you see the news? I did. This changes everything, Anna. What we thought was a family dispute is actually part of a much larger criminal enterprise. The federal prosecutors are going to want to talk to you. What does that mean for Eleanor's case? For getting her the treatment she needs. It means we have more leverage than we thought. Your family isn't just facing bank fraud charges anymore. They're looking at racketeering, elder abuse, securities fraud, and interstate commerce violations. They're going to want to cooperate to avoid spending the rest of their lives in prison. The next morning, I was at the hospital at 5 a.m., helping to prepare Eleanor for her flight to Geneva. She was weak but alert, and her doctors were cautiously optimistic about the treatment prospects. I'll be right behind you, I promised as they loaded her onto the medical transport. I just need to take care of a few things here first. She gripped my hand one last time. Make them pay, Anna. At 8 a.m., while my grandmother was in the air flying toward hope and healing, Detective Sarah Chen knocked on my mother's door with a warrant for Patricia and Marcus's arrest. I wasn't there to see it, but Henry called me with the details. Apparently, Patricia had answered the door in her silk pajamas, coffee cup in hand, completely unprepared for what was happening. Marcus had tried to run out the back door but was caught by a second officer waiting in the yard. Bank fraud, forgery, and theft in the first degree. The charges carried potential sentences of 10 to 20 years each. But the story was far from over. 3 days later, I was in Geneva, sitting beside Eleanor's bed in the pristine clinic overlooking Lake Geneva. The CAR-T cell therapy had begun, and while it was too early to know if it would work, her doctors were encouraged by her initial response. "How are the legal proceedings going?" she asked during one of her more lucid moments between treatments. "Good. Henry says the evidence is overwhelming. The bank security footage, the forged signatures, the documented transfer to their personal accounts, it's all there. The prosecutor is confident about getting convictions." Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. "And how are you handling all this, dear? This can't be easy for you." I considered her question carefully. The truth was, I felt lighter than I had in years. For so long, I'd made excuses for my family's behavior, tried to maintain relationships with people who fundamentally didn't respect me or anyone else. Now, with all the pretense stripped away, I could finally see them clearly. "I'm actually doing better than I expected," I said honestly. "It hurts to know they're capable of this, but at least now I know where I stand. And more importantly, you're getting the treatment you need." "Good girl," Eleanor whispered, closing her eyes. "I'm proud of you for fighting back." Over the next week, as Eleanor's treatment progressed, I received regular updates from Henry about the legal case. The local news had picked up the story. Family steals dying woman's treatment money, and public sentiment was strongly against Patricia and Marcus. Several prominent lawyers had offered to take my civil case pro bono, wanting to help me recover damages beyond just the stolen money. But the most surprising call came from Detective Chen on a Tuesday morning. "Anna, I wanted to give you a heads up about something we discovered during our investigation of your family's finances." "What kind of something?" "It appears this wasn't their first time. We found evidence that they've been systematically draining various family accounts for years. There's money missing from your grandfather's estate, from your cousin's college fund, even from a charity account your grandmother had established for cancer research." I sank into a chair beside Eleanor's bed. "How much are we talking about?" "Conservatively? Over $3 million across multiple accounts and time frames. Your brother had a very sophisticated system set up, shell companies, offshore accounts, forged documents. This was a long-term operation." "My God." "The good news is that we can probably recover most of it. The bad news is that this is now a federal case, which means much more serious charges and much longer sentences if they're convicted." After hanging up, I looked at Eleanor, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with growing amazement. $3 million, I said quietly. "Those clever little thieves," she murmured, though there was no admiration in her voice. "I always suspected Patricia was up to something, but I never imagined the scope of it." "The detective says they can probably recover most of the money. You could get back everything they stole from your accounts over the years." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lake. "You know what I want to do with that money, Anna?" "What?" "I want to establish a real foundation for cancer research. Something that will help other families facing what we're facing. And I want you to run it." The idea took my breath away. "Grandma, I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know about caring for people. You know about fighting for what's right. Everything else can be learned." She turned to look at me with eyes that were clearer and brighter than they'd been in months. "The treatment is working, Anna. I'm going to beat this thing. And when I do, I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure other people have the same chance." 6 weeks later, Eleanor's doctors declared the treatment a complete success. The cancer was gone, not just in remission, but actually gone. It was the kind of result they'd hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. We returned to Seattle as different people than we'd been when we left. Eleanor was cancer-free and energized with new purpose. I had been forever changed by watching my family's true nature revealed and finding the strength to fight back. Patricia and Marcus had been convicted on multiple federal charges. Patricia received 15 years in federal prison, Marcus got 12. The sentences were harsh, but as the judge noted during sentencing, they had shown a callous disregard for human life and a pattern of predatory behavior against vulnerable family members. The recovered money, eventually totaling $3.2 million when all accounts were traced, became the seed funding for the Eleanor Evans Foundation for Cancer Research. Our first initiative was a fund to help families pay for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. On the one-year anniversary of Eleanor's diagnosis, we held the foundation's first fundraising gala. It was a small affair, maybe 50 people, but it raised an additional $200,000 for the treatment fund. During my speech that night, I talked about the importance of fighting for the people we love, even when the people we expect to help us become the obstacles we need to overcome. My grandmother taught me that family isn't just about blood, I said, looking out at the room full of doctors, nurses, social workers, and cancer survivors who had become our real family. Family is about showing up, about sacrifice, about putting someone else's needs before your own when it matters most. Some of us are lucky enough to be born into that kind of family. The rest of us have to build it ourselves. After the event, Eleanor and I sat on the terrace of the hotel, looking out over Elliott Bay. She was wearing a new dress, bright blue, her favorite color, and she looked more like herself than she had in 2 years. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they hadn't stolen the money?" she asked. I considered the question. If Patricia and Marcus hadn't betrayed us, I never would have learned about Eleanor's secret trust fund or her changed power of attorney. I never would have discovered the full extent of their theft from other family members. The foundation would never have existed. Sometimes, I said. But then I think about all the families we're going to help, all the people who will get treatment because of what we're building. Maybe this was always supposed to happen. Eleanor reached over and took my hand. You know what I think? What? I think they did us a favor. They showed us exactly who they were, and they gave us the motivation to become who we were meant to be. She was right. In trying to destroy us, my family had actually set us free. They had stolen my money, but they had given me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight back, smart enough to win, and worthy of the love and respect they had never given me. But the foundation was just the beginning of our mission. As word spread about our work, we started receiving calls from families across the country who had been in similar situations. People whose relatives had been denied experimental treatments because of cost, people who had been defrauded by family members, people who felt hopeless in the face of a medical system that seemed designed to exclude them. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. There was Maria Santos, a single mother from Phoenix whose teenage daughter had a rare form of leukemia. The experimental treatment that could save her life was available in Germany, but their insurance wouldn't cover it, and Maria couldn't afford the $600,000 cost. We became their first treatment grant recipient. There was Robert Chen, an elderly man from San Francisco whose son had drained his retirement accounts, leaving him unable to afford the surgery he needed to walk again. We connected him with legal aid and helped him recover enough money to pay for his operation. There was Jennifer Walsh, a nurse from Denver whose mother needed experimental Alzheimer's treatment in Japan. Her brother had convinced their mother to sign over power of attorney to him, then had refused to allow the treatment, preferring to keep the money for himself. We helped Jennifer navigate the legal system to regain guardianship and get her mother the care she needed. Each case reminded me why this work mattered, why what Patricia and Marcus had done to us was about more than just money. It was about the fundamental human right to fight for your life and the lives of the people you love. 6 months later, the Eleanor Evans Foundation announced its first major research grant, $500,000 to fund a clinical trial for a new immunotherapy treatment that could help thousands of cancer patients. But by then, we had also launched 3 other initiatives: the Family Advocacy Legal Defense Fund, which provided free legal representation to families fighting financial abuse, the Experimental Treatment Access Program, which helped families navigate the complex world of clinical trials and international treatments, and the Medical Financial Literacy Project. which educated elderly Americans about protecting themselves from financial predators. At the press conference announcing our research grant, the room was packed with reporters, medical professionals, and families we had helped. Dr. Richardson was there, beaming with pride as she discussed the promising early results of Eleanor's treatment protocol. Henry Morrison sat in the front row, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction at how far we'd come. But the person I was most proud to see was Detective Sarah Chen, who had become an unofficial advisor to our foundation. Her expertise in financial crimes had helped us develop protocols for identifying and reporting elder abuse that were now being used by police departments in 12 states. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd and felt a profound sense of purpose that I had never experienced before. "A year ago," I began, "my mother and brother thought they were taking my grandmother's last chance at life. Instead, they gave us, a chance to build something that will save many more lives than just one. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened." Eleanor, now completely healthy and serving as the foundation's chairwoman, leaned into the microphone. "And sometimes," she added with a mischievous smile, "the people who try to bury you don't realize they're planting seeds." The audience laughed, but there was truth in her words that went beyond humor. Patricia and Marcus had intended to destroy us, to leave Eleanor to die while they profited from her suffering. Instead, their betrayal had revealed their own crimes, led to justice for their many victims, and created something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of their cruelty. After the press conference, I found myself standing alone in the hallway of the hotel, looking out through tall windows at the city where this journey had begun. Seattle looked different to me now, not like the place where I had been victimized, but like the place where I had learned to fight back. A young woman approached me hesitantly. She looked to be about my age, with tired eyes and the kind of desperate hope I recognized from my own face in those early days. "Ms. Evans? I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw your speech on the news. My name is Lisa Park, and I think my stepfather is stealing from my mother. She has Parkinson's disease, and her memory isn't what it used to be. I've been noticing that money keeps disappearing from her accounts, but she doesn't remember giving him permission to take it." I turned to face her fully, giving her my complete attention. "Tell me everything." As Lisa told her story, the forged checks, the missing jewelry, the gaslighting and manipulation, I saw myself from 18 months ago. The same helpless rage, the same feeling of fighting an impossible battle against people who were supposed to love and protect their victim. But I also saw something that I hadn't had in those early days, hope. Because now there was help. Now there were people who understood, who had resources, who knew how to fight back. "We're going to help you," I told her. "I want you to call this number tomorrow morning." I handed her David Walter's business card. "Tell him I sent you. He's going to help you build a case, and our foundation is going to make sure you have whatever resources you need." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I can't afford a lawyer." "You don't need to. We've got this covered." As I watched her walk away, card clutched tightly in her hand, I thought about the ripple effect of what Patricia and Marcus had done. Yes, they had hurt us. Yes, they had stolen from us and threatened us and tried to let a woman die for money. But they had also set in motion a chain of events that would help hundreds of families like Lisa's. They had created their own destruction and our salvation in the same act. Eleanor appeared beside me, moving with the energy and grace of someone half her age. The treatment hadn't just saved her life, it had given her back her vitality, her purpose, her future. "Another one?" she asked, having watched my conversation with Lisa. "Another one," I confirmed. "Good. The more we help, the more we justify what we've built here." We stood together in comfortable silence, grandmother and granddaughter, survivors and fighters, looking out at a city full of people who might need what we had learned to provide. "Do you ever wonder," Eleanor asked, "what your mother and brother are thinking about in their prison cells?" I considered the question. Patricia and Marcus were serving their sentences in different federal facilities, and neither had attempted to contact me since their convictions. I had heard through Henry that Patricia spent most of her time in the prison library, reading legal texts and filing appeals that would never succeed. Marcus, apparently, had found religion and was supposedly writing letters of apology to his victims, letters that none of them wanted to receive. I think, I said slowly, they probably still don't understand what they did wrong. People like that don't usually develop empathy just because they get caught. Probably not, Eleanor agreed. But maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point is that they can't hurt anyone else now and we can help the people they already hurt. She was right, as she usually was. The question of whether Patricia and Marcus felt remorse or understood the magnitude of their crimes was interesting but irrelevant. What mattered was that justice had been served, that their victims had received some measure of restitution, and that their story had inspired the creation of something that would protect other vulnerable people. As I looked out at the reporters and photographers, I thought about that terrible night when I first discovered the theft, when I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I had no idea then that I was actually at the beginning of the most important fight of my life, a fight that would save my grandmother, expose the truth about my family, and give us both a purpose we never could have imagined. The granddaughter they tried to destroy had become the woman who would help save lives they never could have touched. And that was a victory worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. But more than that, it was a legacy. Years from now, when Eleanor and I were both gone, the foundation would continue helping families fight for their loved ones. The legal precedents we had helped establish would protect vulnerable elderly people from financial predators. The research we funded would save lives around the world. Patricia and Marcus had intended to steal a single woman's last chance at life for temporary financial gain. Instead, they had created an institution that would save countless lives for generations to come. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from transforming their worst acts into something beautiful and lasting. They had tried to bury us, never realizing that they were planting seeds that would grow into something far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. And in the end, that made us not just survivors, but victors in a way they would never understand.